Hey everybody, welcome back. It's time for another economics lesson. Today we're going to be talking about roles and responsibilities in a free enterprise. Okay, so here we go. Our essential question is, what are the benefits of a free enterprise economy? So that's the question that we hope to answer by the time we're all done with this. So we'll start off, we talked about the roles and responsibilities of the entrepreneur. So role of the entrepreneur, first of all, what is an entrepreneur? If you remember back from our first lesson, or one of our first lessons, an entrepreneur is the person who takes the risks. They're the ones with the ideas. They're the ones who are the owners, the manager, the owner, not so much the manager, but the owner um, of the business. Okay, so the person who organizes, manages the factors of production in order to seek the reward of profit. Okay, that's sort of the entrepreneurs. Now, entrepreneurs are important. Why? Because they're the ones that start the businesses. They create the new products. They take the risks in order to achieve profit, to give us all kinds of new products, new services, new ideas, new things that we end up wanting and going out and buying as consumers. Now, here's the thing with entrepreneurs, most of them do fail. Close to 90% of entrepreneurs fail at least once, but many of them do achieve success. And not all of them become millionaires, but a lot of them do achieve success. Now, really successful entrepreneurs attract other entrepreneurs and hope that they'll be the next Bezos or Zuckerberg or Elon Musk or name your millionaire, billionaire, quadrillionaire, whatever. Everyone wants to be successful like them. So that basically allows them, seeing those people succeed, um, especially people like the Bezoses and those that sometimes didn't always go to college and stuff like that. Seeing them succeed gives other wannabe entrepreneurs the hope of success. Now, the role of consumer, that's the one that you and I will most often play, is the role of the consumer. Consumers are the deciders. Consumers, if they like a new product or a service, then they buy it a lot, then the producer is rewarded with the profits from the sales. And if the consumers don't like the new product or service, well, then that producer loses money, and maybe they go out of business. Okay, so the success of products actually is in the hands of the consumer. If the consumers like the product, it's successful. If consumers don't like the product, it's not successful. So it's kind of like consumers are voting on what will and will not be successful. And the success of some products leads to the innovation of other new products and features. We get new phones all the time, right? Every year almost. But really, what's new about them? And sometimes it's just features. It's the number of cameras, or it's where the microphone is placed, or where the earphone jack, or even if there is one, or where the power plug is, or even if there is one, and things like that. Those are the kinds of things like features that will sometimes change, and benefits are made. The role of the government. Now, this one's a little bit complicated. The government does play a role in the economy, and the role that it plays kind of fits the desires of the people at the time and the desires of the people in the past. So the government has become involved in the economy, especially here in the United States, because citizens asked the government to take that role. So government plays four major roles in the economy. It plays protector, provider, regulator, and consumer. So four roles there. We're going to take a look at each one of those roles. Okay. So as protector, the government has made laws and regulations regarding things like false and misleading advertising, which basically means you can't say that a product does something if it really doesn't. Okay, so you can't say that it cures cancer if it doesn't cure cancer. Okay, there's also regulations on unsafe food and drugs. Okay, you see recalls on food and prescriptions and over-the-counter medications pretty often because something is found to be dangerous or unsafe within that product and it gets recalled. Um, they set regulations on environmental hazards, so what kinds of pollutions can be put into the air, onto and into the ground, into the water, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. But then they also set regulations on unsafe working conditions. Used to be that a child of about 7 or 8 years old could work in a factory. They did very, very dangerous jobs. They were paid literally maybe a penny a day to do that work. A lot of them lost fingers, toes, and things like that to those working conditions. They worked in mines, um, all kinds of stuff like that. And consumers, people went to the government and said, that's not right. And so the government made regulations. The government also protects the constitutional right to own private property. That's part of the protector also. So protecting that right to own property. As provider, the different levels of government do different parts of being provider. So the national government provides services like the justice system, national defense. They give subsidies, which is money, to agriculture, to energy production, to oil and fuel production, to mineral extraction, mining, in other words, to all kinds of things. So the government is always giving money to industries, to companies to support their business and encourage them to keep going. State and local governments provide things like roads, highways, public education, public welfare services, libraries, parks, garbage collection, sanitation, like sewer service and garbage collection is part of that. Transportation, think of the Wood Lake bus, the TCAT, the Visalia Transits, um, Amtrak, that's national. So Amtrak is national train service that is part of the U.S. government. So those are all ways in which the government is provider. As regulator, the government is charged with preserving competition in the marketplace, and that's the biggest part of being a regulator that the government has to do is make sure that competition still exists. So what does that mean? That means getting rid of monopolies or what we used to call trusts. Okay, so regulating that kind of stuff so that not one company becomes the only one within an industry. It regulates and oversees communications and transportation. It regulates interstate commerce and transportation, banking, nuclear power, things like that. State governments, they're in charge of regulating insurance, medical insurance, car insurance, um, home property insurance, all those kinds of insurance things. Those are regulated by the state. Um, the state also regulates automobile registration and laws and regulations on automobiles and driving. Local governments, those would be your county and your city. They set up building regulations, they set up zoning and building permits and things like that. So there's a lot more that the government does at the different levels, whether it's local, state, or national, than what I've listed here, than what's listed in the book. These are just some examples of things. So this regulator role, though, is really controversial. A lot of businesses don't like being told how to do their business, and that's kind of the reason why a lot of them became entrepreneurs, so that they could do their own thing and not just work for somebody else who tells them what to do. But consumers don't always trust businesses, and that businesses will do what is best for the consumer and the general population, and not just what is best for profits. And we've seen that happen a lot where businesses will do things, and it's really all about the profits. And the decisions that they make actually hurt other people. So, that's why consumers and individual citizens have gone to the government and said, hey, we need regulations here and we need regulations there. And will you do it, please? Because, some businesses, it's always the thing that one person ruins it for everybody. Somebody went out and did something that they, hurt everyone else. And, that's how it goes. All right, now consumer. That's the role that we're most familiar with playing ourselves. But did you know that the government consumes? Of course it does. Consumes all kinds of things. The government buys military goods. They buy computers, real estate, anything having to do with office supplies because they employ millions of people. They purchase vehicles. All kinds of stuff. Food. Pretty much you name it. If it's something that any other industry purchases, the government is probably also buying that stuff as well. So the government is a huge consumer in all the markets in a free market. especially in our free market. Now, consequence of government's role in the economy is a mixed economy. Okay, so as the government gets involved, you get more and more socialism, right? The government taking control of an economy or taking control of a sector or part of the economy. That's where you're getting into socialism, right? So a mixed economy is defined as having parts of this and parts of that. So in this case, we have a mixed or a modified free enterprise capitalist economy here in the United States. So you can call it mixed or modified, however you want to refer to it. They both mean the same thing. So in this mixed or modified free enterprise capitalist economy here in the U.S., people are free to conduct business pretty much however they want. You can go out and buy what you want and do what you want. A lot of the other freedoms that we've talked about, you have all those freedoms, but they are subject sometimes to government intervention and regulation. All depends on what your role is. So if you are an entrepreneur, you're going to be more subject to government intervention and regulation than a normal consumer is, because a consumer, it has very little regulation on them. Um, but entrepreneurs and especially producers, manufacturers have a lot of regulations that they're subject to. So, historical perspective on this idea of mixed economy, a mixed or modified free enterprise. If we go all the way back to 1803, one of the first times the government really got involved in the economy was the Louisiana Purchase, when President Thomas Jefferson bought that land from France. Then, several years later, about 60 years, 64 years later, 1867, the U.S. government bought the Alaska Territory from Russia, and so that was government being involved in in the economy, right? They went out and purchased more land, and then said how that land could be used. President Teddy Roosevelt's antitrust campaign. I mean, that's a huge one. Teddy Roosevelt, flat out, because not only did he stop big corporations from becoming monopolies, um, and went on that big monopoly or trust busting campaign. But it was also Teddy Roosevelt who set up the Food and Drug Administration and set regulations on what could be put in food, so the safe food and drug laws, what could be in medicine, so you couldn't put cocaine and stuff in medicine anymore that you give to children, all that kind of stuff. Canals, Teddy Roosevelt, I mean, he was the one in charge of building the Panama Canal, for crying out loud. Okay, so that's government really getting involved into these industries. Um, Government created the interstate highway system after World War II. Railroads. Government was involved in building and selling land to the railroad companies. The Transcontinental Railroad, most famously, the government gave a lot of money to those companies to build the transcontinental railroads. You have state colleges, um, student loans and student grants for college is all part of the government being involved in the economy. Government gives money for science and technology, space exploration, energy efficiency, medicine discovery. Government's been involved basically in the economy since the very beginning of our nation. So to say that we have always been a pure capitalist country really is not true and never has been true. So the involvement today by the U.S. government in our economy, well, as people ask the government to get involved in the economy, either through who they elect into office or by going to those elected officials and saying, hey, please, we need regulation in this field and we need regulation in that field. Either way, it's done that way, and then the government gets involved. But then once the government does get involved and they have regulations, it's hard to get them to back out again, to get out of those industries. How much government involvement is too much? Who's to say? It changes from generation to generation. It changes from decade to decade. If you were to tell people in 1897 that we would have child labor laws today, they would laugh at you. If they were told that there would be a minimum wage, they'd think that was the most ridiculous thing ever. that we had safety regulations across all industries, they would be pretty amazed. So everything changes as time goes on. And the trend right now is that the younger generations, your generation, the millennials and such, they want a whole lot more regulation than the baby boomers did. They want a lot more socialism involved. Not all of them, not all of you, but there's a lot more that people are wanting the government to do because they see it as successful in other countries around the world. And if we're supposed to be one of the richest countries in the world, which supposedly we are, um, why are we not doing these things also that other countries that are less wealthy than we are, why are they doing it? So, those are kinds of things that happen, and progress happens one way or another. It's either progress forward or progress back. So, either more involvement or less involvement, all depends on how people want. And that's the end of our lesson for today. So,